Hello, welcome to another episode of the Gentle Business Based podcast. I'm Fabi, I'm a nervous system friendly business and systems mentor, and I support other sensitive women build an aligned and sustainable heart centered business with more clarity and calm and structure so that you can really grow your business without burning out. And today I wanted to talk about making things easier and more accessible for ourselves. So sometimes when we start something, we think everything's set in stone and we have to stick to that. But it's okay to change things to make them work for us and the phase that we're in. So just because something worked for us at a time, or we started something or tried something, doesn't mean it's always going to work for us. And then often it can become an obstacle because there's resistance in doing something. So as an example, recording this podcast, I set out to do this with video. I've done lots of kind of video trainings and stuff before. Always felt really comfortable with that. So I was fine to do that as a video because I automatically had multiple resources. I had the audio, the video. I could use it for YouTube, for Reels. So there's a lot of repurposing I could do with it. And that really worked for quite a long time. I think I'd done about 18 episodes like that. And that was absolutely fine. But at some point I've noticed a bit of a shift of not always wanting to be in the video. I noticed I didn't always like the way I showed up because there's a different focus when you also do video alongside the audio. I felt like I couldn't quite focus on the actual audio. So it started to become a little bit of an obstacle. And I noticed that the recording process wasn't as enjoyable as just doing the recording at that point. So I changed it. So over the last this episode and the last episode, I started to only record audio, no video, and I'm really enjoying it again. So it was making an adjustment to make it work for me, to make it accessible for the phase I'm in. It doesn't mean that I'm going to do this forever as just audio. In the future, I might change it again to video when I feel like it, or maybe for certain episodes. But I took out that obstacle that I noticed that didn't quite work for me anymore, and I changed it. So currently this works for me. It brought back more joy. I can focus on just talking. I can record at any time I want. And it actually kind of reconnected me to the initial, once I wanted to start this podcast, I actually did like a little test episode. It was supposed to be my first episode. Of course, I didn't release it in the end, but where I just get to sit cozy in my office, not worrying about what I look like, and I just recorded that episode, and I loved doing that. I didn't release it in the end, but that was kind of my initial intention of this podcast. So I kind of reconnected back to that. So sometimes we get distracted with optimizing things, of going the extra mile, so we have all these extra resources so we can optimize and share even more. But maybe that disconnects us from what actually works for us and the purpose of what you're currently creating. And I think the purpose for me for this podcast is just the audio for now anyway. And that felt really much more connected. So I know it's very easy to then get distracted to maybe what do experts say, what do other people say, what we should be doing, should be making more of this. But often we then create an obstacle. And just along that, I want to just address, because sometimes I think we can stop ourselves not wanting to learn something new, not try out something new or testing it. So if you're really struggling, or there's a huge obstacle for you to start doing videos, sometimes it is just trying it out in an accessible way for you. So we learn to do these things, but then you might notice, okay, this isn't actually for me. So we can then adjust. But we also don't want to stop ourselves from learning something new, from growing, from trying out new things for our business, for our life. But for me, especially in this instance, I've done many video trainings in the past, so I knew it's not something that I, just needed to learn or get comfortable with. I knew it was something that just didn't work for me in this current season and the purpose of this podcast. And I prefer just doing the audio recordings. But as I said, that might change again, and that's absolutely fine. So that's really just an example, but I think it applies to many areas. So whatever you're working on at the moment, ask yourself, are you putting up an obstacle that might keep you from sharing, from creating content, from creating resources or programs, whatever it is? And is it something that you might just need to try out to see if you like it or not, get better at, really practice? Or is there a simpler, more aligned way or version of sharing, taking out that obstacle and making it work for you? So another example, for me, was Reels. I really didn't want to do, I don't fancy making little clips on Instagram. It's just not something I wanted to do. I didn't feel aligned, but I was perfectly happy to take clips out of my podcast and share them as a reel. So I made it accessible for me. I made it simpler for me. So I had a really easy way of creating reels without lots of extra effort, and also without doing something I didn't actually want to do. So I made it easier for myself. So it's ultimately what we do. It's about making things easier, simpler, more accessible to you. So it works for you. Just because something works for somebody else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And that could be temporary changes or long-term changes. So adjusting it to the phase that you're in, making it work for whatever phase in your business you're in, how you're feeling, if there's anything else that you need to consider, or is it like long-term changes as well? So noticing, does something work or not? So just because you set out to do something in a certain way doesn't mean you can't adjust or change it, even if it's just for that phase, temporarily or long term. And ultimately, anything we start is an experiment. I think if we see it as an experiment, we take so much pressure off to make it perfect, but it allows us instead to see what is working and what doesn't. And then we can make adjustments. So maybe at the moment it's a program that you started offering or want to start offering, and you notice that the way you deliver it doesn't work. So how can you make it simpler? So just because everyone else delivers maybe live workshops or live coaching sessions doesn't mean you have to do it in the same way. If you notice that doesn't work for you out of whatever reason, how can you simplify it? How can you make it differently? How can you make it work for you? The same for content creating. So what's in your way? How can you simplify it? I think it's always that question of what's stopping you, what's kind of that obstacle that keeps us from moving forward. So how can you simplify that and make it more accessible? At least for now. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do that more, the harder bit, the more complicated bit later, but it just means that right now we're making it easier. The same thing with instead, creating a product or a freebie. Instead of creating something completely new, can you use something you already have and share that? You can still create something new later, but start with what you have. The same thing, I know, can get really overwhelming. Again, it's coming back to that. We don't need to, the big polished version straight away. Start small. So something I always say, it's great to have an automation for a freebie. And really important, it really helps with our business. But if you haven't even created a freebie yet, don't worry about that bit. Create the freebie and share it manually in exchange for people's email address. It's a little bit more fuss, but it's better than nothing at the beginning. And if it keeps, if that obstacle is there of creating that automation, then just start with what you have, what's easy, what's doable. Later on, we can build on that. We can create more around it. We can create email automation. We can create, the kind of automated sharing of a freebie or of a product. All these things can be done later. So start really simple. The same with if you're setting up a simple freebie, just have a landing page and one email. It doesn't need to be 20 email sequences straight away. If that's an obstacle, start with one. You're sharing it, it's out there, you can build on it later. So I think sometimes we set ourselves these obstacles and barriers that keep us from moving forward and sharing whatever it is. And there's usually some simpler way, a way that works a little bit better for you at the time. And again, it doesn't mean that it's not going to change later, but you want to make it easy for you right now. Keep it moving. Same, maybe a workshop, maybe, your intention is to do live workshops, or you see lots of other people doing live workshops, but maybe a bit apprehensive about doing it live. So maybe start with a recording. Start doing recordings, sharing the recording, and then once you have a little bit of practice with that, you can do them live later. So it's a little bit, what's the next easier step that helps me get to, the bigger step? Or sometimes it's just adjusting what works for you right now. So always ask yourself, what would be easier right now? What would be a little bit simpler? How can I move forward? And again, it's not about never challenging ourselves. We still want to challenge ourselves, but we also want to make it accessible, doable, so we don't stretch our nervous system too much straight away. Sometimes we do that, we jump into that big thing, and then our nervous system is just so overwhelmed and we completely step away from it. So we want to gently move ourselves forward, gently test what's doable, what's not. How can I make this simpler? If I'm in a really stressful phase of my life, then how can I simplify my content and my delivery? How can I make this really easy? And later on, I can look at different options again. What would make things easier right now? How can I move forward? And you can then make changes again in the future or try something new. So we want to take out those small or big obstacles that keep us from moving forward. So I hope this was helpful today. Let me know in the comments what resonates, or if it resonates. And if you like more support with creating an aligned way of working, I would love to invite you to my upcoming Gentle Vision and Planning Reset. We start on the 28th of May as I'm recording this for the next kind of beta cohort that I'm running. It's a full session exploration where we kind of take time to reconnect to what feels aligned, explore your direction, vision, and goals, and your capacity, and really look at building a gentler path forward so you can work in a really clear and aligned and focused way, and in a way that's sustainable ultimately. So if you find yourself thinking that the current way of working just isn't working for you anymore, maybe it doesn't feel sustainable, or you feel disconnected from the direction that you're going, this might be the right space for you to explore that and create a gentler path instead. A clearer and gentler path. And if you prefer one-to-one work, that's also available. Yeah, so just get in touch if you'd like to find out more. I will also share the links in the comments. So thank you so much for joining me today. As I said, please share any insights you had, anything that resonated. And yeah, thank you for joining, and I will see you again soon. Take care.